Hello, I'm Gene Harmon, and you're listening to the Inheriting Heritage podcast. The phrase out of sight, out of mind is something I'm sure we have all heard at different times in our lives, but it has deeper connotations than what appears on the surface. Basically, it is saying if something or someone is not seen or heard on a somewhat frequent basis, then they are out of the realm of mental memory or conscious thought. While it seems callous, think about it. It's often applied to things which need to be done but are forgotten in the chaos of normal life, or subjects purposely ignored, or even to people. The reason given for being forgetful? Out of sight, out of mind. This has a direct application to the importance of interpreters at their particular sites. Uh, the Egyptians had a complex system of religious beliefs surrounding life and the afterlife. I'm not even going to try to delve far into that. But in tombs and on the sarcophagi of their dead were extensive hieroglyphs spelling out not only the lives of the deceased, but prayers to assist them in the afterlife. Part of telling their stories was writing their names among the hieroglyphs. They believed that to speak the name of the dead is to make them live again, and to write something down is to make it true. Applying the correct prayers among the personal history helped with guidance to and through the afterlife. This immediately brings to mind some movies of ancient dead coming to life, but that was not their belief. What they meant was to speak their name, to remember their name, to remember who they were. That by doing that ensures they will never die in memory. And if they remain alive in memory, they're truly not dead, but continue to live in the hearts and minds of those who remain. The written history corroborates and verifies their existence. As archaeologists uncover tombs and burial sites in Egypt and around the world, one of the first things they want to know, one of the first things they try to find out is who were they? Finding that name brings them back into current thought and memory. History is analyzed to make connections within a specific era, and their stories come out of murky, forgotten realms to the brightness of revelation, spelled out and described in, say, continuing detail as things about them are discovered. If you have ever done any genealogy research, it feels pretty much the same when you uncover a new name in your tree. First, you're not sure who it is. Then it's just a name. The more you discover, the deeper you go. Just on that one person, the clearer it becomes of who they were. Their life comes into more focus with every learned detail. In the process, you are bringing this person back to life. Now, not breathing and walking around on Earth back to life, but they're being remembered and their name is not forgotten. Personal stories of soldiers who fought and or died do the same. Learning what brought a particular soldier to the particular moment in time where he was engaging the enemy brings his story to life. Knowing a name puts a face to his statistic. Don't get me wrong, I find the military maneuvers and tactics fascinating myself. Knowing a particular unit crossed this field or fought in these woods or manned these trenches is great. But if you have at least one story, one name, one true experience of a particular soldier or warrior who was in the particular unit or group, it becomes even more real. It becomes, as the Egyptians believed, true. True to memory and true to the memory of the individual. Historical and cultural interpreters should truly strive for this. Learn and know the history of your sites, but also learn and know as much as possible about those who lived, fought, and or died at the site, no matter what the connection. And sometimes it may seem random. A good example of this is Fort Moultrie on Sullivan's Island in Charleston, South Carolina. Used militarily from the Revolutionary War up through World War II, a lesser known fact is that Osceola, the Seminole leader, is also buried there. The importance of his life and what brought him to Charleston is just as relevant to the site as the 200 years of military history. Andersonville National Historic Site did a wonderful series titled Story in Stone, where they delved deep into the personal stories of Union soldiers buried in the cemetery. Their names and lives became spoken on lips and written about, bringing them back to life. They also had a program for visiting groups where they were given a prisoner's name and general info. As they progressed through the tour, they learned more about them, putting details in a living entity with a name. At the end of the tour, the fate of the soldier was revealed to them. Their name may be one of the nearly 1,300 in the cemetery, but they're not forgotten. They are remembered and continue to live. Apply this to any historical or cultural site, but it is just as relevant to natural and environmental sites. See, regardless of how conservation minded someone might be, unless they are daily involved in conservation efforts as a career, it tends to fall into life's dark corners and pushed aside. How many times have you visited say, your favorite park or site, and while there, your passion rises as well as your love for the site? You're thinking of all these things you could do, and then you return home, and life takes hold again. I'm not saying your passion for conservation was false, but it falls often into that out of sight, out of mind. This is unfortunately a consequence of our modern world. Jonathan Kingdom wrote in National Geographic in September 2001, quote, "Humans, once islanders in a sea of wild things, are now the sea around islands of wilderness," end quote. Whereas the environment and our relation to it was once considered important, it is now viewed more as an afterthought. See, modern culture puts a negative stigma on anything, which places importance on our natural world instead of the modern, especially in the medical realm and pharmaceuticals. Indigenous knowledge and folk remedies, which my grandparents swore by, are referred to as uneducated and therefore ineffective medicine. It was even considered witchcraft, and many were ostracized and killed for it. Wagons and homesteads used to push the fringes of the frontier. Now civilization surrounds parks and wilderness areas, creating buffers with the wilderness areas and borders which nature and wildlife do not recognize. Then there's the question that comes up of why are there bears here? Or why do the deer cross here? Or wolves? Panthers? What? Daily life consumes our existence. Jobs, school, routine life. We talk and plan vacations for us to escape the modern world, and when we return, those outdoor places we love, they fall into out of sight, out of mind. We retreat to the sea of modern existence. I'm not attacking anyone on this, for I fall victim myself. This summer, we went on one heck of a vacation from Colorado to Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico before returning home to Texas. This included sites such as the Denver Natural History Museum, Sand Creek, Little Bighorn, Yellowstone, and the Grand Tetons. It was a fantastic week, and I wish we could hit the road again soon. But reality, it does set in. Life sets in, and daily routines kick back in. Some things fall into the out of sight, out of mind. In the February 2001 National Geographic, San Chico said, "There used to be much game there, but when my grandfather was a boy, both farmers who lived nearby have fenced the land so we are caged in. Our old life is gone now." Ironically, this could have been written by an animal. Who is caged in? Animals or men? Or who is kept out? Animals or men? Farming has been altered greatly by progress, both agriculturally and with husbandry. Methods and techniques have progressed, somewhat altered and somewhat returning to old methods, especially after the agricultural disasters leading to the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression. We are caged into our modern lives, living an existence of job lives, and less often our lives. The game or wildlife referenced above has diminished not only by societal progress, but because of the progress of civilization upon wild spaces. The boundaries we create have an effect, sometimes negative, on the natural world around us. But often we don't even consider that. It's out of sight, out of mind. John Muir said, quote, "No traveler, whether a tree lover or not, will ever forget his first walk in a sugar pine forest. The majestic crowns approaching one another make a glorious canopy, through the feathery arches of which the sunbeams pour, silvering the needs and gilding the stately columns and the ground into a scene of enchantment." End quote. Step into the outdoors, and I feel alive. I live for the experience of the beautiful world around us, its stories, its history, its unparalleled beauty. I know many of you are the same way. But again, what happens when we come back home? Aldo Leopold said, quote, like winds and sunsets, wild things were taken for granted until progress began to do away with them. Now we face the question whether a still higher standard of living is worth its cost in things natural, wild, and free. For us of the minority, the opportunity to see geese is more important than television. End quote. The world around us is too often taken for granted, from the wilderness of our own country to the poles and around the world. Progress is given and yet taken away. The price has been high, in some ways more than other. Aldo Leopold asks the question of the value of this progress. Has it been worth it? Has our modern technology become more important to us than the experiences our natural world has to offer? All I have to point to as an example is smartphones. Now, Leopold also said, quote, we reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in her eyes. I realized then, and have known ever since, that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I was young then, full of trigger itch. I thought that because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. End quote. The truth of predatory prey relationships lies deep within this quote, but the symbolism of the fire dying in the wolf's eyes cannot be lost. As progress advances, old ways get pushed aside and labeled as unnecessary or archaic. The respect for our natural world and the understanding of our place within its processes has been lost. Though the research exists to back it up, the circle of life within our natural world is often ignored. We as man, we think we can do it better. We know better. We push previous knowledge aside, out of sight, out of mind, warping it to support private agendas. Henry David Thoreau said, quote, it is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue and so to make a few objects beautiful, but it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. End quote. As interpreters, we want every guest to care about our sight, our subject. We want to engage their minds and their passions, making their visit memorable. There's a lot more involved in accomplishing this than only regurgitating facts. The interaction must be personal and crafted in such a way that it connects with them. Whether they completely agree or disagree, it really doesn't matter. The goal is to paint those mental pictures and carvings to create the conversational background upon which the interaction is built. Building upon this foundation will, as Thoreau said, affect the quality of the day, or affect the quality of their experience. Interpreters should strive to not only make those connections with guests, but to do it in such a manner that it creates a more than a passing interest. We want it to really stick. We want them to remember and care long after they leave the site. We want them to get involved in some way. It is our responsibility, our passion, to create these memorable experiences. If the guests leave and our message fades quickly into out of sight, out of mind, we are not doing justice to our site or our profession. Inheriting Heritage provides interpretive consulting, interpretive training, and heritage interpretive programs. The programs are done in more of an interactive style instead of straight dissemination of information. Consulting ranges from fine-tuning existing programs to development of new ones. It is not era or subject specific, but geared toward the process of interpretation and how it can best be utilized at your site to engage guests. Interpretive training is based on Freeman Tilden's founding principles of interpretation and styled after the methods of the National Association for Interpretation. I have also been approached by members of the sales and marketing fields who are interested in adapting my training to improve the effectiveness of their respective staff. Qualified as a certified interpretive guide with the National Association for Interpretation Inheriting Heritage LLC has developed and implemented interpretive programs at state parks, national parks, historic sites, and museums. Before I go, I would like to send a huge shout out and thank you to my wife Amy. She has been a constant source of encouragement, pushing me to chase my dreams, and provided invaluable input. This podcast and my interpretive endeavors would not be possible without her support. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will listen next time to the Inheriting Heritage podcast. This podcast was written and produced by me, Gene Harmon, manager of Inheriting Heritage LLC. The music playing in the background is Wild Dew by Audio Result. The opening and closing music is Cantina Rag by Jackson F. Smith. If you have any questions or want to know more, please visit my website at inheritingheritage.com. Whether it is the natural world, our cultural world, or our historic past, it is a heritage which belongs to all of us, a heritage we have inherited together.